So moving on to Paris, we move to West Africa. Nigeria has definitely been in the spotlight this year. Boko Haram has continued to make headlines, expanding their plight of terror into neighbouring countries. The oil fuel crisis has contributed to the slowing down of the Nigerian economy. And more interestingly, the rise of Muhammadu Buhari, elected to clean up the mess behind the previous administration. How has he managed so far? Adama Munu looks at the man who set himself the challenge to change Nigerian politics.
Muhammadu Buhari may be no stranger to Nigerian politics, having overseen military rule in the 80s, but he certainly inherited some challenging issues this year. He won the presidential elections in May, beating the then incumbent President Goodluck Jonathan. The election campaign was less divisive than previously thought, with an overall majority win in the mainly Christian South. And with that came a set of promises to tackle issues that proved haunting for Jonathan's administration. Buhari inherited one of Nigeria's key security issues, the onslaught of attacks from Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria. A tough military man, deemed fit to deal with the group, it would undoubtedly be the yardstick against which his presidency would be measured. He also promised to continue the fight against corruption within public and state institutions, having accused Goodluck Jonathan of having left the treasury virtually empty. During the first 100 days of his presidency, local media were largely supportive of Buhari, comparing him favourably with Goodluck Jonathan. He presented himself to the electorate as a hawk on security and an iron fist on corruption, pledging to recover mind-boggling sums of stolen oil money and vowing to crush Boko Haram, who has killed at least 15,000 in the northeast. But had he delivered as he promised? The kidnap of over 200 girls in 2014 in the northeastern town of Chibok grabbed worldwide acclaim, and as Buhari rose to victory, he said that they would be central to the fight against the group.
But we cannot claim that defeated Boko Haram without rescuing the Chibok girls and all other innocent persons held hostages by the Israelis.
Less than 2 months later, however, on the 8th of July, hundreds of members of the campaign group Bring Back Our Girls marched to Nigeria's presidential villa to demand government action.
They said they will negotiate. When? 500 days. They're still seeking for negotiation for price sake. If it's their own baby, how would they feel?
President Muhammadu Buhari said he could only give further promises of a swift end to the violence and intensification of the search for the girls. Part of this was the regional coordination made between other countries, including Chad, Cameroon and Niger, all of whom have been subject to violent attacks from Boko Haram this year. Both Cameroonian leader Paul Biya and Buhari agreed to intensify intelligence sharing between their security forces, a key element in tackling cross-border threats. Even more encouraging was the decision to allow the 8,700 troops of the multinational Joint Task Force, headquartered in Chad and comprising soldiers from Benin, Cameroon, Chad, Niger and Nigeria. Any assessment of Buhari's success against Boko Haram has to include that attacks have spiked since he assumed office. His interest in accepting a possible negotiation with Boko Haram in August showed him to be a pragmatic leader, a tactic which we may see more of in his policymaking in the new year. Oil sector fraud and the non-payment of federal revenues into government coffers has also been an important feature of Buhari's presidency so far. In an early sign that he was serious about corruption, Buhari sacked the entire board of state oil company NNPC, notorious for mismanagement and rampant theft, and installed a Harvard-educated lawyer to spearhead reforms as the new managing director. In September, he also sacked his oil minister Diezani Alison Madueke, who was arrested in London on the 2nd of October by the National Crime Agency for suspected bribery and money laundering offences. She was in the role between 2010 and 2015. And more recently, Buhari oversaw the arrest of former National Security Advisor Sambo Dasuki for alleged fraudulent activities over monies devoted to the fight against Boko Haram. But while security and corruption have at large seen an improvement in the country, the big elephant in the room remains clarity in regards to the economy. There are currently more questions than answers around what the policy impulse will be, clouding the outlook for both fiscal and monetary policy. An issue which emerged towards the end of the year and may still be a matter of contention in 2016 was the revival of the Biafra movement. The movement's main radio station, Radio Biafra, was closed in July after the government accused it of airing seditious and unsavoury hate messages. The revival of the movement emerged with the arrest of the Biafra activist Nnamdi Kanu, who was arrested in October and charged with criminal conspiracy, membership of an unlawful society, and criminal intimidation. Thousands of protesters took to the streets in southeast Nigeria to demand his release. But whilst Kanu has since been released, another issue inflamed between both Sunni and Shia factions in December. Nigeria police killed at least 3 Shia Muslim protesters after opening fire in the northern city of Kaduna. This resulted in Shia Muslims protesting in 6 northern Nigerian cities against a military crackdown that has allegedly left hundreds of their members dead. It devolved allegedly after a Nigerian general's car was hit by a projectile and the arrest and beating of Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki, leader of the Shia Muslim group, the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. And in the last week of December, human rights groups have accused Nigerian soldiers of firing on Shia children and dumping bodies in mass graves. Buhari is yet to comment on these findings. And if not, in the coming weeks and unfolding into the new year. Adama Munu, The Report.